Coming up on this Wednesday edition of Daybreak, North Korea fires 7 short-range projectiles off its east coast in an apparent response to the annual South Korea-US joint military drills. President Park Geun-hye calls for greater efforts to ensure reunions for families separated since the Korean War can be held on a regular basis. Plus, with tensions bubbling in Ukraine, the US pledges massive economic and technical assistance to Kiev. Russian President Vladimir Putin says Moscow has no plans to annex Crimea, but says force would be used as a last resort. Daybreak begins now. Thanks ever so much for joining us. To all our viewers here in Korea and around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Wednesday, March 5th here in Seoul. You're watching Daybreak and I'm Mark Broom. Now, we begin with the latest on North Korea's binge of missile firings. On Tuesday, Pyongyang launched several projectiles into the East Sea in another sign of its apparent protest against the ongoing South Korea-US joint military drills. Julianne reports.
At around 4:30 p.m. on Tuesday, North Korea fired 4 short-range projectiles using a multiple rocket launcher into the East Sea. This according to Seoul's defense ministry. These missiles have a range of about 150 kilometers. Immediately following reports of the short-range projectile launches, the defense ministry announced that North Korea had already fired 3 short-range missiles into the East Sea earlier Tuesday morning, bringing the total of missiles launched on Tuesday to 7. The ones fired in the morning flew about 55 kilometers. Defense Ministry spokesperson Kim Min-seok labeled Tuesday's launches as explicit acts of aggression against the ongoing joint South Korea-US military drills, adding that they are keeping a close watch on the possibility of additional provocations. The North Korean regime fired 4 short-range missiles into its eastern waters last Thursday, and then 2 Scud-C short-range missiles on Monday. The sharp rise in the number of launches comes as North Korea has been stepping up its rhetoric. Pyongyang called out Washington earlier on Tuesday for deploying its nuclear-powered submarine to South Korea's southernmost port city of Busan as part of the joint military drills. North Korea's main internet-based propaganda website 우리민족끼리 called the move a provocation for a nuclear war against the communist country. Yurian, Arirang News.
The recent highly emotional reunions of families separated since the Korean War served as a stark reminder that there are still over 70,000 South Koreans waiting for a chance to see their long-lost relatives just one last time. Given the age of most of the applicants, President Park Geun-hye is calling for all-out efforts to ensure more families connect before it's too late. Our presidential correspondent Choi Yu-sun reports.
Just days after proposing to North Korea that reunions for war-separated families be held on a regular basis, President Park Geun-hye called for other ways for the family members on both sides of the border to resume contact.
통일부와 대한적집사사는 상봉 정례화는 물론이고 생사 확인과 서신 교환, 화상 상봉 등을 실현시키기 위해 북한과 협의하기를 바랍니다.
At Tuesday's cabinet meeting, the South Korean leader highlighted the urgency of holding more of the humanitarian events.
남북한에 있는 많은 이산 가족들이 한을 안고 돌아가셨는데 생존해 계신 이산 가족들이 한 번이라도 헤어진 가족들을 만나려면 상봉 규모를 매년 6,000명 이상으로 늘려야 하는 것으로 압니다.
The president's remarks come less than 2 weeks after the two Koreas held their first reunion event in more than 3 years. Some 80 family members from each side attended last month's family gatherings. President Park then said the government's new preparatory committee for reunification should initially listen to public opinion on the issue and draw up a blueprint in an open and transparent way. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
As South Korea readies itself for a possible reunification of the Korean peninsula, it's looking to Germany for lessons on bringing a divided nation together. Hwang Sang-hee sat down with a German economist to hear his views on what steps Korea should take.
German economist Karl-Heinz Packe, who is an expert on German unification, says giving North Koreans a clear economic perspective is key in preparing for the reunification of the Korean peninsula.
You know, Seoul is a city of 20 million, the whole metropolitan area of 20 million people, a thriving economy. So once the border is open, North Koreans will come in great numbers.
In an interview with Arirang News on Tuesday, Packe said the Koreas must begin by forming a currency union and transforming and privatizing the rundown North Korean industrial sector. This process cost Germany over $2 trillion. Although there are varying estimates, it's expected to cost Korea around $3.5 trillion. But Packe assures it will be money well spent.
First of all, North Korea has quite a supply of raw materials. And with all the trade links that South Korea has to Europe and America, I think there are all advantages you can think of to invest in Northern Korea.
But the outlook is not all rosy. With a reduced threat of war upon reunification of the two Koreas, there is the question of what will happen to the thousands of North Korean soldiers who represent nearly 40% of the population.
You will have high unemployment for a while. We did have very high unemployment in Eastern Germany for a very long time, and still the unemployment rate in Eastern Germany is higher than in Western Germany, even today. But that's the price to be paid.
Packe says Germany experienced structural difficulties and suffered from low growth rates for a while. But despite the struggles, he agrees with South Korean President Park Geun-hye that a reunified Korea would have benefits for both sides.
So in your view, do you think reunification would be a bonanza for the two Koreas?
But we did have, as a consequence of unification, some major economic reforms. And today, Germany is one of the leading, the stability anchor in Europe. So the whole venture has been successful, and I would expect exactly the same in the case of Korea.
Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Turning now to the latest on the crisis in Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin says there is no need to use military force in the Ukrainian region of Crimea, but said it would be used as a, quote, last resort. The Russian leader ordered troops involved in a military exercise in western Russia to return to base. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Russian President Vladimir Putin says he has no plans to send Russian troops into Ukraine, but at the same time says he hasn't ruled out the possibility entirely. That was just one of many messages Putin delivered at a news conference Tuesday evening, fielding questions on the situation in Ukraine from reporters. He defended his actions and pointed the finger at the West, noting that Russian forces have not fired a single shot since they were dispatched to Crimea. Putin called out the leaders of the U.S. and other Western powers as being hypocritical in their condemnations, specifically mentioning the United States interventions in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. He said all came without a UN resolution authorizing the action. As for the leadership of Ukraine, he said the interim government was a result of a coup and that the current parliament is partly legitimate, while the country's acting president is not. He went so far as to say that militants have sent the country into chaos and that Ukrainian nationalists and anti-Semites were walking the streets of Kiev and other cities. Putin also voiced support for ousted Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych. The Russian leader said Yanukovych told him he had not given orders to shoot demonstrators. The news conference came just a few hours after President Putin ordered 150,000 troops taking part in military exercises near the Ukrainian border to return to their bases within 48 hours. Presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov made the announcement Tuesday, calling the exercises a success. The surprise military drills in the Central and Western Territorial Commands were launched last Wednesday as tensions rose in Ukraine. The withdrawal comes after the European Union condemned the drills as an aggression and threatened Russia with sanctions if the troops did not return to their bases by Thursday. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
And while Russian President Putin was making it clear that military options are the last resort in dealing with the crisis, the United States was pledging massive economic and technical assistance to Ukraine's new government. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry arrived in Kiev Tuesday, offering an economic and technical loan package worth $1 billion pending congressional approval. He said Washington was prepared to take further steps against Russia if the situation in Ukraine doesn't de-escalate. Meanwhile, back in Washington, President Obama said Tuesday that Russia does not have the right to use force as a means of exerting influence and insisted the Ukrainian people should be able to decide their own future.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
Korea's foreign minister will raise the issue of the Japanese military's use of sex slaves during World War II at a UN human rights meeting in Geneva later on this Wednesday. Kim Ji-yeon has the details.
South Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se will address the UN Human Rights Council this week to raise the issue of the so-called comfort women, or women forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military during World War II. Seoul's foreign ministry said Tuesday Minister Yoon will give a speech in Geneva on Wednesday local time to convey the country's stance on the human rights issue. This is the first time since 2006 Seoul's top diplomat will attend a UN Human Rights Council session. Minister Yoon is expected to call on Japan to compensate the victims of its wartime program of military sexual slavery. The move comes amid Tokyo's continued denials of its past wrongdoing. Japanese media outlets recently quoted Japan's senior vice minister of education, Yoshitaka Sakurada, as saying that a 1993 apology for the sexual slavery system was fabricated, while calling for a re-examination of the supporting testimony. The Kono statement is an official apology issued by Tokyo's then Chief Cabinet Secretary Yohei Kono to apologize for the atrocities Japan committed during its imperialist past. Tokyo's right-wing Liberal Democratic Party said those who were foreign ministry officials at the time should be summoned regarding the testimony. The LDP also said it will start a petition to call for a revision of the statement. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
While Korea is considered a leading nation when it comes to science and technology, there's still a lot of room for improvement. With that in mind, two government ministries have released plans to boost investments in research and development. Shin Se-min reports.
To give Korea's research and development sector a much-needed boost, the government will be pouring more money into related institutes over the coming months. The Ministry of Science, ICT and Future Planning laid out its plan Tuesday to provide 68.7 billion won, or over $64 million this year. The money will mainly go toward establishing an R&D-based station for small and medium-sized enterprises in 4 different Korean cities. The science districts will foster business research laboratories, improve exclusive research zones, and promote networking among researchers. More than $54 million will be funneled into businesses to commercialize research outcomes, and the rest will go towards establishing a better environment for startups. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy also laid out its own plan on Tuesday, promising to invest over $140 million in the nation's smart sensor industry over the next 6 years. The government will use a major chunk of that investment in generic technology development. Along with wearable smart devices and autonomous vehicles, which represent just 2 of 13 industrial projects, the government is looking to create more sensor-related products for the international market. The global smart sensor industry is booming. But here in Korea, the market is led by smaller companies, and they haven't been able to compete effectively on the world stage. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, this next story won't come as too big of a surprise for people living in the South Korean capital, but a new study shows Seoul is among the world's top 20 most expensive cities in 2014. The London-based Economist Intelligence Unit's annual worldwide cost of living survey found Seoul to be the 17th most expensive city to live in out of 131 cities it surveyed. The survey is based on the average price of various goods and services, from food and public transport fees to private school tuition. The most expensive city to live in is Singapore, followed by Paris and Oslo. Mumbai was ranked the world's cheapest city. Korea's nominee for central bank governor, Lee Ju-yeol, is expected to take the post on April 1st, and he says he wants to communicate more fully with the market. Hwang Ji-ae has more on the BOK veterans' vision and some of the challenges that lie ahead.
The nominee for the Bank of Korea's next governor, Lee Ju-yeol, says he fully acknowledges the importance of communicating with the market. During a phone interview with the Korean daily Joseonilbo on Monday, he said that the central bank has to gain the trust of the people. He went on to say that the central bank has to focus not just on the numbers, but should look for ways to be in harmony with the actual economic sentiment. Back in 2009, when Lee was sworn in as the senior deputy governor, he pledged to focus on boosting economic growth by working closely with the government. Whether Lee's perception of the economy remains intact is unknown, but the veteran central bank official is considered to be neutral when it comes to monetary policy. The presidential office spokesperson said that Lee has a profound knowledge of the central bank's business and has a good sense of the international financial market. Lee started work at the central bank in 1977 and has held key positions through the years, including as the head of the research department. Once he takes office next month, experts say that he will be preoccupied with matters such as how to weather the impact of the U.S. Federal Reserve's tapering of its monetary stimulus program. The nation's snowballing household debt will also be a concern.
Lee will have to think deeply in terms of monetary policy about how to counteract the real estate and household debt problems that are growing as major threats to the Korean economy.
The National Assembly will hold a confirmation hearing for Lee within the next 3 weeks. The lawmakers do not, however, have the power to veto the appointment. Hwang Ji-ae, Arirang News.
Good day, I'm Eunice Kim, and here are your headlines from around the world. We'll begin in Egypt this morning, where Armed Forces Chief Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has given his clearest indication yet that he will run for president. State news agency MENA reports the popular military man told an audience at a Cairo graduation ceremony that he could not turn his back on calls by the majority of Egyptians for him to run for president, and that official procedures will follow soon. In July last year, al-Sisi deposed Egypt's first democratically elected leader, Mohamed Morsi. Egypt has been caught in a bloody political struggle since then. And over in the United States, President Barack Obama has submitted a budget blueprint for the 2015 fiscal year that features a focus on fighting poverty. He proposed boosting tax credits and job training programs for U.S. workers, as well as increasing spending on infrastructure and expanding early childhood education. The proposal marks a shift away from last year's emphasis on deficit cutting. It faces strong resistance from Republicans who prefer a reduced government role in promoting economic opportunity. And Syria has drafted a plan that would remove all of its remaining chemical weapons out of the country. According to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, Damascus would miss the original deadline to completely get rid of the weapons by April, but that there had been good progress. About a third of Syria's toxic arsenal will have been removed by the end of this week. The global chemical arms watchdog said the rest is on course to be shipped out by the revised deadline of June. Thailand's foreign ministry says a state of emergency remains intact in Bangkok and could be extended until anti-government protests end completely. The country had been rocked by protests that began in November aimed at unseating Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra, though many large protest sites had been closed down and shifted to central Bangkok over the weekend. The government had imposed a 60-day state of emergency in January. It said that a final decision on the extension will be decided before it expires on March 22nd.
Now, if you were to ask fans in Korea which Olympian they would like to meet, chances are they will say figure queen Kim Yeon-ah. And on Tuesday, fans had a chance to meet her at a fan meeting. Now, with the fan meeting filled with fans and the media, they had a chance to find out about her plans after retirement. And with that, Kim Yeon-ah stated that she will always be involved with figure skating even 10 years down the road because there's nothing she knows outside of figure skating. While she's been spending some alone time for now, fans can expect a gala show coming up shortly. And moving over to football, where the South Korean national football team is set to face off against Greece. And with the World Cup right around the corner, there's still a lot of work to be done for the Taeguk Warriors. And of course, the main focus in this match will be the return of Park Ju-young, who was finally included in the latest roster by manager Hong Young-bo. And with that, chances are Park will go in as the lone striker with Son Heung-min, Koo Ja-chul, and Lee Chung-young backing him up on the offense. Now, the major leagues have a long history and a long list of names who were inducted into the Hall of Fame. Now, the KBO, well, zero, but can look forward to our first KBO Hall of Famer in 2016. With the KBO Hall of Fame being built in the city of Busan, KBO officials announced on Tuesday that they will mark the grand opening of the Hall of Fame by inducting their very first Hall of Famer. Now, the fans over in Busan will get a treat as they will probably induct Choi Dong-won, the former Lotte Giants pitcher, posthumously as their treat. And moving over to some Tuesday night's KBL action, the Jeonju KCC Aegis beat the Incheon Itilan Elephants in a high-scoring game, 91-83. Meanwhile, with the Goyang Orions taking on the Anyang KGC, let's take a look at the highlights. Now, a close game from the start as the Orions take a 23-20 lead after the first quarter before KGC cuts the deficit to 37-36 going into halftime. Third quarter, KGC rallies to take a 1-point lead going into the fourth, but a monster fourth quarter from the Orions, outscoring KGC 25-16 as they take this game 80-71. And finishing things off with some V-League action, we had GS Caltex cruise past Daejeon KGC 3-1 over on the women's side. Meanwhile, Samsung Hwanje Blue Fangs taking on Uri-Card. Let's take a look at the highlights. Now, the Blue Fangs have been dominating Uri-Card this season, and they continue to do so, taking the first two sets 25-16 and 25-20 before Uri-Card comes back with a 25-23 third set win. But with Leo Martinez exploding with 48 points on the night, the Blue Fangs take this match 3-1 as they get closer to their league title. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. Well, chilly start to the morning will pave the way for a chilly day. Yes, you heard me right. Today will be a chilly day. Highs will struggle to hit 5 degrees in the Seoul metro area, and other areas will also notice 4 to 5 degrees lower afternoon highs. And the heavy snow advisory was issued in some parts of Gangwon-do, as these regions will receive a heavy snowfall of up to 20 centimeters today. But the rest of the country could expect to see a beautiful blue skies. But now, after the days of mild weather conditions we've had, it could feel cold for some of us. So let's bundle up tight before heading out. And how cold will it get? Let's take a look. The morning low in Seoul starts out at -1, and afternoon high will hike up to 5 degrees Celsius. And the temperature for other regions like Gwangju and Busan will top out at 8 and 12 respectively. But this is the weather outlook, and here are the readings for today. And Busan should top out at 12 under lots of clouds. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju and Daejeon will climb up to 7, while the top temperature among Gangwon will be at -1, or 1 that is. Well, that's all for now, and back to you, Mark, in the studio.
Well, thank you very much, Jion, for the weather there. And those are the stories we have for you at this hour. A brand new look, Korea Today, is coming up in about half an hour's time. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.